Hi, I'm Adam,
This is Kevin.
and we are Tech Guys Who Invest. This is the place for business people and investors to learn all about investing. We offer a fresh perspective on what it's like to have a day job while investing, and we share lessons learned on our investing journey. Our vision is to educate and entertain you while adding tons of value to your daily commute. Welcome to our show.
On this episode of Tech Guys Who Invest, Adam and I are going to talk about a condition and mindset that has the potential to bankrupt you. Imagine that. All your hard work, the money you've saved or leveraged, just gone, vanished. Now, instead of being out of the rat race, you are deeper in it than ever before. Now that we have your attention, we're going to talk about the shiny object syndrome. Here's some points about it from an article written on entrepreneur.com. At its core, shiny object syndrome is a disease of distraction, and it affects entrepreneurs and investors alike. The reason it's called shiny object syndrome is because it's a metaphor for a small child chasing after shiny objects. In this case, we're referring to investors who hear about a particular way of making a profit. They learn some surface level information, and then they immediately lose interest, or they don't spend enough focus to learn more about that asset and the ways that they can make that profit. And then they start chasing the next thing they hear about is a new trend to make a quick buck. So, Adam, I'd love to know if this has happened to you.
Hey, Kevin. Yeah, it has happened to me, and I think it happens to almost all of us at some point. Some of the things I remember, examples of shiny objects for me along my investing journey, have been flipping, wholesaling, tax liens, tax deeds, land, self-storage, mobile home parks, retail commercial, office building. Do you just want me to shut up now? Because it's like, you can tell I've got a bit of a problem here, right?
I think we can go a little bit more.
I've got a couple more, believe it or not. How about you, Kevin? Have you experienced this?
Yeah, that's a great question, Adam. And in terms of my shiny object syndrome, I am definitely in the same boat as you. I started off with a free webinar from Bigger Pockets hearing about house hacking and multifamily. So I went down that path for, I'd say, a few months. Then I learned about, what's this thing like remote wholesaling? That sounds cool that I can do it from anywhere. Then I kind of explored that. I didn't do much of a study into that. And then I learned more about investing in notes. And then when you get into notes, you can do a bunch of different things within that. You can invest in first position, second position. You can buy performing. You can buy seller carryback notes. So it's not like I am completely immune to shiny object syndrome now. I think I have a bit more of a focus on what it is that I want to look at. Oh, and I forgot to mention one thing that I heard of that was like, oh, this could be a cash cow was car washes.
Oh, man, I've always wanted to own a car wash.
You can see it, especially out here in Florida. They are some cash cows.
Yeah, I know. I've always thought that would be an interesting business to own.
Yeah, me too.
Well, one thing that's interesting to me is kind of the difference between the shiny object and something that really distracts you and slows you down, puts you off in the wrong direction, versus experimenting with something to see if you like it right. Because if you know me and a little bit about me, you know that I have this experimental mindset. I really like to try things. I'm kind of experiential, and that's the reason I experiment, because I need to experience something to learn. And so I'll try something. It's important to me that I don't go too far. And I think that it's interesting to think about the difference between getting completely distracted versus trying something to know if you should move forward with it.
And I'd love to know your thought process on A, when you decide I should learn more about this, and then B, when you start realizing, this isn't exactly the fit for Adam, I should probably move on to something else.
Yeah, I think what I've learned over time is it's important to really have a firm why. It's important to have a vision or a real high level reason why you're doing all of this. And that way you have some foundation to point to, have something to
Agreed.
look at and say, does this line up with that? Will this support that? Will this get me there faster or will it slow me down? Right.
Hmm.
So those are some ways I think about it, as having that firm why. How about yourself? I mean, what do you do to sort of prevent yourself from going down too many of those rabbit holes and going too far?
I think you touched on it. Remembering the why, remembering what I am doing all of this for. And I also have to take a step back and say to myself that, yes, in theory, each one of these things can get me to retirement faster. It's not necessarily a matter of if they can, but more so how much work I'm willing to dedicate to that. Am I interested in doing that? And having that why that anchors you is huge, because if you have an interest and a passion for what it is you're investing in, it makes the entire process so much more enjoyable. Because there are times where it's going to be tough. You're going to be working a ton of hours, especially if you are like Adam and myself, where we're working full time jobs. And Adam, I know that you have a family and kids, and I know that there are activities that you have to dedicate time to that too. So if you don't have that anchoring point to say, hey, this is the vision, this is what I'm going towards, it's so much easier to say, oh, somebody's making money here. Maybe I should try that. And then somebody else is making money here. I don't like that. I'm going to do this. So I kind of use a balance of my focusing on the end goal while at the same time thinking about what am I interested in. And I say that because with non-performing notes, for example, I want to be able to help people stay in their homes, give people a second financial chance. And you really can only do that by purchasing non-performing notes. So that's one way that I look at it and approach it.
Yeah, I think that's a great example, like to further support the example of really having a firm understanding of why you're doing it. That right there is a really good example of that. I know when you're first getting started, I still remember the feeling, and I mean, I actually still sometimes get it, where there's so many options. It's hard to know, where should I start? When all of this is new, what's the best route to take? And it took me a while to figure out the best route. It's kind of relative to yourself and those goals that we're talking about, that why that we're talking about.
And what I like about real estate, for example, is like you touched on that point, is there's so many ways to make money. And it's up to you, whatever you're comfortable with. And that's the answer is up to you as the investor. You have to ask yourself a series of questions like, what is your risk tolerance? How much time do you have to dedicate? What are you interested in? Questions like that to help you understand where you are as an investor will, I think, will also dictate the direction that you want to take.
Yeah, I agree with that. So Kevin, what back to the shiny object syndrome itself, what do you think are some negative results from having it or partaking in that?
That's a very good question. I would say the two things. The biggest one is you will lose money if you just keep jumping from one strategy to another without trying to master something, without trying to actually do some business. Because you'll just spin your wheels and you'll spend a ton of money, right? You'll spend money on getting educated. You'll spend money on trying to do things, but not enough focus to actually get things done. For example, I started off when I got interested in real estate. I was living in the San Francisco Bay Area. So I got an Eventbrite, tried to see what events were out there. And the first thing I saw was come to this free 2-hour event, like a seminar. I said, sure, I have no idea what this is. Zero clue. So I go in there and it's free. It's 2 hours. They talk about fortune builders and flipping houses. And then the next step was, okay, we gave you this free 2 hours. Sign up for $200 for this one night event. And they put some urgency into you where if you sign up now, you can bring somebody, or if you don't sign up today, it's going to go up to 400. And that is a business model, that education aspect. They refer to them as gurus. And for some people, it has worked, right? But in my personal case, I didn't know what I wanted. So I wasn't going to dish out that much money to take more education. The other point that I was trying to make is that you can burn out very easily if you have no sense of direction. If you have no sense of, hey, this action leads to this, which will ideally lead to those results. And you'll just be spinning your wheels, and you've only got a limited amount of energy and time. So those are the two things that I think will be the negative results from trying to chase that shiny object. What do you think, Adam?
Yeah, those are great points, and I like a lot of what you said in there. Another one that I thought of is a loss in some of the knowledge gains you get, especially when things are so new to you. For me, when something's new to me, I have to spend some time ramping up and really understanding what it is, getting context, building a foundation of knowledge. And it takes a while to build that. And contrary to what a lot of the gurus that you mentioned and so-called experts in the real estate investing space will lead you to believe, this is actually hard work and it takes time. So you may find yourself spending a lot of time gaining knowledge, and you probably have more than you realize. Then if you change and go into something completely different, you essentially start over. And I didn't quite realize the impact of that in the beginning. So I also went to some local area RIA meetings, and I remember I was interested in rental property, and this tax lien, tax deed guru comes through. And he got me really excited about it. And he makes it sound easy. And it's the exact same thing you mentioned, where his free pitch was great. And he even gave away some little nuggets,
Yep.
but he wanted you to sign up for the $400 class that he was offering for $299 that night only if you signed up. And then you go to that class, of course, and I'm sure there's $1,000 one after that, and then after that, there's I'm sure. But I like you, I didn't go. Although I did come home and start to look into tax liens, I started to look into tax deeds, and I actually spent some time on it. Well, that, just like the rental property investing, requires focus and specialization of knowledge. You have to really start to understand that as a business. It took away from my rental property time allocation. So I think, that's another thing that is kind of a drag on your progress from shiny object syndrome.
Yeah, absolutely. You touched on that opportunity cost, where if you jump from, let's say you spend 3 months learning about house hacking, and then somebody tells you about flipping, and you spend 3 months on that, abandoning the 3 months towards or learning about house hacking, those 3 months you'll never get back, right? And you are not any further than you were before, and you're just at a surface level of 3 months of knowledge trying to learn how to flip, as opposed to having 6 months of knowledge on how to house hack.
Right, right. And the type of active investing you and I are doing, it's really running a business. I mean, we're really running small businesses here. Now, I know some of our listeners probably are just interested in passively investing. For example, lending capital to people like you or me to do deals and getting nice returns on their capital. And that's great, and that's a passive way to invest, not a lot of the work involved. But the type of investing you and I are talking about, where it's active and we are the ones doing all of this work to provide those great returns to the capital investors, that's essentially running a business, and it takes a lot.
Yeah, I agree. And this same concept, though, applies to if you're going to invest in any asset class. You start researching about maybe the biotech industry, and then you see some Flipboard article that says the marijuana industry is the place to be in. And then you're like, oh, wait, let me just jump into this now. And each time somebody releases an article that says, here, you can make exponential growth doing X, Y, and Z, and you go from article to article to find that, you're going to experience all the problems that we had just discussed.
Hey, Kevin, there is a lot of money to be made in marijuana investing.
I'm not saying there isn't, Adam. All I'm saying is if you jump from one thing to another, and that could be a marijuana. Hey, if you are an investor in marijuana, please let us know, reach out, and we would love to learn more about that and your experience with that.
Yeah, we'll have to have you on the show and have all of our listeners learn with us. What are some ways our listeners can avoid the shiny object syndrome trap?
That's a great question, Adam. I think one of the best ways is to figure out your investor identity. And as we alluded to earlier, it's nobody has those answers except for you. And it's almost, I liken it to somebody asking you, so Kevin, tell me who you are. It's such a broad question that you have to sit down and think about it. And the same thing applies to your investor identity because in especially in real estate, you can make money and a profit and good in a ton of different ways. That's only talking about the direct path of real estate, like investing in assets. You can make money in businesses adding value to those investors, whether it's being a contractor, whether it's building a system that helps investors do X, Y, and Z faster, that they have more time now. So understanding, I think, how you can add value. I think each of us has an inherent strength or something that we gravitate towards where we can add value to somebody else. And understanding those things can help you kind of stay away from the shiny objects because you're saying, okay, I'm good at X. I'm going to learn how to be the best at X. Those are my thoughts, Adam. What do you think?
Yeah, first of all, I completely agree with you that figuring out your investor identity is probably the top step you could take to avoid this. And I also agree with you that that takes some time. And I believe that's so well worth it. It is one of the most valuable uses of your time is to spend the required time to figure out your investor identity. And then once you've got that figured out, it's a matter of being aware and being persistent. Be intentional about taking on those mindsets. I'm going to be aware and I am going to be persistent about my investor identity. And I am not going to get distracted. And when I notice I am, I'm going to bring myself back and I'm going to stick to it and perhaps choose some sort of a time frame or a goal of some sort that you can measure if it's all brand new to you and you're not 100% sure that that really is your investor identity. Maybe, give yourself a certain amount of time and it needs to be enough time to be able to make progress.
I agree. I agree with that 100%. And one thing that I wanted to touch on, it being called the shiny object syndrome, it's worth mentioning that when people are talking about the way that they're making money and they're trying to raise capital, of course that they are going to sensationalize what they do. It's marketing, it's advertising. That's what they're trying to do. So it's understanding, like we said, is defining your investor identity if it makes sense for you to go down that path.
Yeah, that is a super point that a lot of new people don't get to hear. When I say new people, I'm just talking about those who are beginning their investing journey or maybe just starting to learn about it. I know I didn't understand that for a long time myself, and it really tripped me up because you hear all of these so-called experienced investors, or at a minimum, people that are in the game, whether they're experienced or not, they are embellishing their stories of success and all of these deals they're doing or all of this money they're making, et cetera. And when you don't see that same performance, you start to kind of doubt the area you're focused on, wondering if you're doing things wrong, et cetera. And that can really trip you up and slow you down. So you have to be careful to not let that get into your head and understand a lot of those people are not actually having as great of a time as it sounds like.
Yeah, that's a good point, Adam. I think you hit the nail on the head when you talk about measuring things and making sure and tracking your progress. I think outside of investing, this applies to really anything you're trying to develop, being able to measure it and then being able to tweak your strategy. But the measurement part helps you understand how far you've come from where you just started and aligning your strategy with how much further you have to go. So if you have no idea, if you're not measuring anything, then you won't know if anything is producing any results that are favorable to you and your business.
Right, right. And I think it's something that you may have said in the past about sticking with it long enough to get some wins. I really like that. Don't abandon it too soon.
So Adam and I have talked about a couple ways where you can avoid the shiny object syndrome by going after your why, establishing what that is, and then staying focused. One thing that Adam and I have noticed that set apart successful investors or successful people in general is that they have a propensity to take action. If they're learning something and they say, oh, this could be a good idea, they turn that could into a lesson learned or into an experience. They try and they come up with a plan and next actionable steps, do the steps, see how it works for them, and learn and tweak as they go. So taking action is really one of the only ways you are going to be successful, and one of the only ways you will be that step further out of the rat race. What do you think about the idea of taking action, Adam?
Yeah, I agree with what you said, Kevin. And a practical way you can do that is to list some goals you have. Don't list too many because that will have the same effect that we've been talking about. It will scatter your focus. So take 2 or 3 goals and write those down. It's important to write them down and then list some tasks that you would need to do to be able to meet those goals. And then do them. Like Kevin said, just do those and check them off, keep track of them. And those will be your first steps towards taking action. So one of the reasons Kevin and I are so passionate about this is because we've both experienced it. And we believe that a lot of people, probably everyone in some way, experiences this in some way. And we'd really like to help you out. So if you have questions or would like to talk about this more with us, we'd love you to reach out to us at TGWIpodcast.com. That stands for Tech Guys Who Invest Podcast, TGWIpodcast.com. That's it for this episode of Tech Guys Who Invest. This is Adam.
And this is Kevin. Thank you so much for listening to us. Don't forget to join our Facebook page where we're building a community of investors so that we can share ideas, tips, and other ways to help us get out of the rat race. If you found value in this podcast, it would mean the world to us if you could share it with your network. Lastly, we love feedback. It's how we get better. So if you wouldn't mind spending 30 seconds and leaving us an honest review on iTunes or Stitcher or whatever platform you're using, that would be super sweet. If you want to get on Adam or Kevin's calendar, go to tgwipodcast.com/contact. We want to help you invest safely, wisely, and ultimately get you out of the rat race. Thanks again.